and the people many millions are relying on. Since the lockdown, thousands of volunteers are lifting their hands for duty, giving up their own time as part of a collective fight to feed many vulnerable people on the Cape Flats. For author and activist Griselda Grootboom, it's a strong sense of civic duty that brought her here to Khayelitsha, an informal township in one of Cape Town's virus epicenters.
It's very important for us to come out and serve our communities, and where it's time for us to also show what is the serving of communities, because usually our communities see people from on TV, they see people's work on TV, and for us to come close and finally come door to door and give out these food parcels, it's very important. It gets relevant.
It's a story many volunteers are relating to, as everyone contributes to efforts while facing this crisis. Even the elderly and the young are making sure their community gets fed. Some volunteers do this while their own futures remain uncertain.
Being in the hospitality industry, we work crazy hours. We always at work, like day in and day out. So now, because of the lockdown, I've got nothing to do with my time. So I thought, why not giving something back to the community? You know, come and volunteer, help out. There's a lot of people that are suffering a lot. I'm also suffering. The whole world is suffering. But there are people that actually didn't even have jobs. That won't get UIF. They won't get leave money. So I thought, okay, let us give something back to the community and help out the way we can.
But it's not just in people's homes that this important work is being done, but in temporary shelters as well, where the mother city's homeless are being cared for in these trying times.
Everybody's feeling the same pain. I've been in property 22 years and I have fun. I enjoy property, and I hope worldwide I'm open to taking on stock anywhere and give an excellent service. I love doing what I do, but I also love helping people. And it's not the first time I've done this. I've often helped feed firemen as well in the Cape Town area and offering my time.
Volunteers of just about every sector of society is joining the government, NGOs and the community to make sure that no one gets left behind in these difficult times. Now, even though the lockdown will soon begin to ease, their work remains just as important. Dr. Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And in Uganda, business owners are accounting their losses after Lake Victoria overflowed its shores. The waters flooded a number of commercial and residential areas in the capital, Kampala. CGTN's Hilary Ayasega filed this report.
Rosna Suna's restaurant is going under. Lake Victoria has burst its shoreline, and those living and working nearby are being driven away by the flooding.
Most of my property has been destroyed, so I'm picking the remaining pieces so that I can set up my business elsewhere.
Nasuna is one of thousands of people living on the shores of Lake Victoria. In recent weeks, they've seen some of the lake's worst ever flooding. This used to be a meeting point for hundreds of revelers, but with the rising water levels, many have been forced to relocate and business owners are closing shop. This is Lake Victoria's second highest water level in over 5 decades.
The reason the water levels are jumping up is purely because we received a lot of rainfall. I think since May last year, we haven't had a normal season. It has been raining through.
Local authorities are now releasing more water downstream in an attempt to reduce the levels. They are advising locals to stay away from the shores in the meantime.
The people who cultivate on the shores of the lake and on the banks of the river, please get off those points.
Environmental experts predict that the water levels will continue to rise for the next 2 months. So Nasuna and others will have to wait a little longer to recover from the effects of the flooding. Hilary Ayasega, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Our coverage continues on Africa Live. Stay tuned. Here's a look at what's ahead. World marks Malaria Day with dire warning from the WHO about Africa's situation. And DRC police arrest leader of a cult, hoping to restore pre-colonial Congo kingdom.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Today marks World Malaria Day. This year's theme is Zero Malaria Starts With Me. It's a grassroots campaign that aims to keep malaria high on the political agenda, mobilize additional resources, and empower communities to end the disease. But this year, the coronavirus pandemic is threatening gains made against malaria in recent years. Already, the World Health Organization has warned the number of deaths from the mosquito-borne disease could double. The number of deaths from the latest malaria outbreak in Zimbabwe has risen to more than 150. Authorities fear the death toll could climb further as efforts to contain malaria are complicated by the COVID-19 pandemic.
170,000 malaria cases have been reported since January, an over 40% increase from the same period last year. Deaths are up 20% from 2019. 25 fatalities have occurred in the last week alone. Discouraging statistics for a nation that was once on course to eliminating malaria. A number of factors are behind its resurgence. Climate change that's seen prolonged, heavier rainfall, shortages of foreign currency that have delayed procurement of spraying chemicals and mosquito nets, as well as increased social mobility, with people moving around more, hampering prevention methods while enabling wider infections. It's also becoming harder to fight transmitting mosquitoes.
The emerging resistance by mosquitoes to some of these chemicals requires that we change the type of chemical frequently. But the change in chemical comes with a cost. So they are more expensive, and when they are more expensive to be afforded, if we can't afford them, what coverage are we getting?
The latest outbreaks are not unexpected. This is the peak malaria season, but the COVID-19 pandemic could get in the way of dealing with cases.
COVID signs and symptoms, they basically are similar to those of malaria. The messaging for preventing COVID is prevention, 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 which is the same for malaria, of course. But when you have now got malaria, we would say go to your nearest facility, because if you don't do that, it will complicate and lead to death. But with COVID, we are saying it's highly infectious. You could transmit to the next person. So social distancing is the message. Now, if I'm in the village, my clinic is 20 kilometers or 30 kilometers away, and there's a village health worker close by, we have a lockdown. Am I allowed to walk to the nearest village health worker? Do I have protective clothing?
It presents a difficult situation.
We all know that we do not want COVID to spread like we're seeing in other places. But we also know that if we don't do anything about malaria illnesses, this peak period, we're going to see a lot more deaths than we've seen in the recent past.
Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
2 UN agencies have made funding appeals on behalf of the Democratic Republic of Congo to help halt the spread of the coronavirus. Here is CGTN's Chris Ochamaringa with more on that story.
Humanitarian aid workers support people in eastern DRC facing poverty, insecurity, and diseases. The region has had a long history of conflict that has impoverished communities. aid agencies say nearly a fifth of the population is struggling to feed themselves. The outbreak of the coronavirus in 5 of the DRC's provinces has only made matters worse.
There's a lot of pressure on donors these days. There are so many crises related to COVID around the world, and Africa is, for the moment, I wouldn't say leftover, but it's not the priority. So we came out with a 58 million appeal to fight COVID here in the DRC.
People displaced by conflict in the east of the country are in dire need of assistance. The World Food Programme says it cut rations for refugees by half in March and April because of lack of funding.
COVID-19 has brought additional challenges. On the food distribution side, the need to impose measures such as hand washing and temperature checking has brought additional costs. And also the fact of having to implement social distancing has meant that distributions are taking longer and therefore costing more.
The DRC has a weak healthcare system that's been underfunded for decades. The country has relied on foreign funding to deal with epidemics like Ebola and measles. The International Monetary Fund announced that it would provide the DRC government with $363 million as emergency aid to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic. The World Food Programme says the COVID-19 pandemic could double the number of people suffering from acute hunger by the end of this year. That forecast could be disastrous for the DRC that has been ranked as the second worst hunger crisis in the world after Yemen. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Washing your hands regularly with clean water and soap has been recommended as one of the effective ways of slowing the spread of COVID-19. In South Sudan, one businessman has tapped into the demand of hand washing containers. CGTN's Patrick Ayette reports from Juba.
Timal Ahmed owned a shop selling construction materials in Juba before a partial lockdown was imposed in South Sudan. When South Sudan's government ordered that all shops be closed except those that sell food, Timal had no business. He then started adapting these containers to be used for hand washing.
I heard that there is no medicine for coronavirus. The preventive measures include washing hands with soap. I am happy to contribute to prevent the spread of coronavirus by making these hand-washing containers. The country still has few confirmed cases, and so far, all is going well.
Timal says he is selling between 150 to 200 of these a day. Each of these containers cost about $1, and many here say they are more affordable compared to imported hand-washing containers. Many Juba residents are relying on Timal's containers to set up hand-washing points and promote hygiene as a measure to slow the spread of COVID-19.
These containers are very good. I'm putting one at my gate. Whoever's coming into the compound must wash their hands, whether they're children or adults. Hand washing for us used to be only when you're going to eat food, but that's not the case now, and the containers are really helping us.
Timal says he is thinking of what other products he could make to contribute to containing the outbreak in his country. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Meanwhile, in South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa has been touring facilities that can house COVID-19 patients. The country is preparing for a possible peak in infections by the end of the winter months. CGTN's Yolisa Jamela has more.
On the walkabout, President Cyril Ramaphosa was informed that this Nasrec Center in Johannesburg in the Gauteng province could accommodate hundreds of people while adhering to all rules of social distancing. This facility will be opened to those who test positive and may struggle to isolate themselves at their own residence. Gauteng is South Africa's economic hub. It's also one of the provinces with the high numbers of positive cases of the coronavirus.
We've been saying that the country now needs to get very well prepared because we are going to be reaching a peak somewhere later in August and in September, where we will need lots of hospital beds.
We are getting our whole public healthcare system to be ready, not just for COVID, but for for giving good quality public health care to the people of our province. So the additional facilities that we are adding, we shared with the President, is that we want to first expand on our current infrastructure instead of putting up something that a few months later will be raised down.
Soon after, Ramaphosa visited one of the province's major hospitals, Charlotte Maxeke. He says he wants to ensure that health workers are adequately taken care of.
The country can't thank them enough, and I will continue to thank them and recognize them for the excellent work that they are doing, putting themselves right in the epicenter of danger is precisely what we are grateful for, and the country needs to thank them.
South Africa has been under a lockdown since the 26th of March. This as the government seeks to halt the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. President Ramaphosa recently announced a risk-adjusted easing of the lockdown, which will entail 5 stages. 5 different levels will determine the severity of the lockdown from May 1, with 5 being a hard lockdown and 1 being almost completely lifted. From May 1, some industries will be allowed to operate, but heavy restrictions on social gatherings and movement will remain restricted. The president is due to visit other areas in other provinces. He says he wants to ensure that the country is absolutely ready should there be a need to accommodate large numbers of people who may test positive for the coronavirus. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Staying in South Africa, a martial arts expert is teaching the ancient practice of Tai Chi, which can boost the immune system's response to viral infections. Here is CGTN's Travis Andrews with that story.
He's a 5-time gold medalist and legend of world martial arts champion, but it's going to take a lot to beat down the spread of the coronavirus, which has led to a national lockdown. But MJ Lee, though, plans to use the healthy benefits of ancient Chinese internal martial arts to assist South Africans boost their immune system, which could be beneficial in any fight against COVID-19.
The Harvard University has recently concluded that Tai Chi can both be classified as meditation in motion as well as medication in motion. It's known for strengthening the immune system. It's known for strengthening the respiratory system. People even suffer from shortness of breath. Through regular practice of Tai Chi and Qigong, it has actually assisted them with these ailments. And I think for us to fight COVID-19 globally, we need to know the importance of strengthening the immune system and the respiratory system.
MJ Lee plans to do daily Tai Chi and Qigong videos and tutorials, which he will upload on social media sites, which is meant to help the elderly and vulnerable adults with their COVID-19 mitigation measures.
China has not stated that we should discard all medical aspects and medical assistance that comes from the fraternity, but rather if we can include these ancient modalities, and in this case Tai Chi and Qigong, then it will go a long way towards boosting the immune systems of our South African citizens, particularly our adults and our elderly that are more susceptible to contracting COVID-19.
The author of martial arts books such as My Journey, My History will also be assisting learners and students boost their immune systems, which could go a long way when it comes to the overall collective effort in flattening the COVID-19 curve. Even though the lockdown regulations will soon start to be relaxed, complacency should be avoided at all costs, and the elderly are being advised to still remain indoors. Now though, with the online videos, they'll at least have some additional assistance in trying to keep themselves in a healthier shape. That's the news, CGTN, Cape Town.
A self-styled prophet has been arrested by the police in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He is the leader of an outlawed group called Bundu Dia Congo. The arrest comes a week after deadly clashes between BDK members and the police. The confrontation left 14 members of the separatist religious sect dead. Ne Muanda Nsemi and his group hope to restore the Congo kingdom that thrived for centuries before the colonial era. It existed around the mouth of the Congo River. Nsemi is a former member of parliament. He was arrested in early 2017 after leading deadly protests against former President Joseph Kabila. He was broken out of prison 2 months later. Well, the news continues on Africa Live. Here's a look at what's ahead. Leaders worried Africa could move from health crisis to food crisis. And Zimbabwe's stock market plunges 55% in less than a month. We find out why. Once again, welcome back on to West Africa now, where Nigeria's Agricultural Minister Mohammed Sabo Nanono says the federal government is taking steps to ensure farmers, millers, and marketers can still operate. Among other things, a lack of clarity on the restrictions imposed to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, both in Nigeria and abroad, are stretching fragile food supply chains to breaking point.
Demand for groceries is high across Nigeria. But some vendors are struggling to sell produce that would draw steady demand. Marcy Yelase sits in front of her idle rice mill with mounds of paddy rice going nowhere.
So you can see that the rice, paddy rice I have in large quantity. I cannot mill because the marketers are not coming. They have stopped coming. When they start to come, I can mill everything here and they will buy.
Although food truck drivers are meant to be exempt from lockdown restrictions, many are afraid for their own safety or fear they will be fined or arrested by overzealous police.
There's no clarity around what can move around, or what trucks can move around, or what assets, or what is essential transportation. So you see many of our transporters and truck owners are scared, or because they're scared to go out and have their drivers on the road because they are worried that they're going to get held or detained because there's no clarity.
30% of Tracking Logistics firm Kobo 360's fleets across Nigeria, Kenya, Togo, Ghana and Uganda are not operating as a result. This results in huge losses for farmers whose crop rot in the fields or at the depot.
Before, to deliver goods for someone to this market, we would collect 65,000 naira. And the highest amount of money we will spend on the road as tips is 5,000 naira. But now you can spend almost 35,000 naira. Who wants to come by road? They have blocked everywhere.
Scarcity has driven up prices of the main staple foods beyond the reach of some people since lockdowns were announced in 3 states at the end of March to tame the spread of the virus.
This lockdown has affected food so much. Before, we used to buy gari for 150 naira. Now it costs between 900 and 1,000 naira. A big cup of rice costed 350 naira before, but now it goes for 500 naira. Beans now cost 170 naira from 120 naira. Things are now more expensive.
While domestic crops and capacity go to waste, the imports the region relies on have also dried up as major suppliers including India, Vietnam and Cambodia have reduced or even banned rice exports to make sure their countries have enough food to cope with the pandemic. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
A coronavirus lockdown in South Africa has left thousands of waste pickers jobless. This group collects recyclables that would otherwise swell South Africa's rubbish dumps and burden municipal trash collection. While they perform this important service, they have not been classified as essential workers. This means they are denied a chance to create income.
For the past decade, 55-year-old grandmother Abigail Kubeka has been a waste picker in South Africa. She walks at least 10 kilometers a day to scavenge for recyclable trash. But all this has changed the minute the government imposed a lockdown.
Since there's this lockdown, we don't collect as much as we do because there are no parties, no weddings, no people are not getting together. So we're not getting the very waste things that they're not going to use. You just have to swallow your pride and start doing this job. Because people, they take it, it's a low job because you go and take those dirty things with your hands.
Kubeka represents around 90,000 waste pickers in South Africa. That's according to research. They collect 80 to 90% of the paper and packaging that the country recycles, saving municipal authorities an estimated 750 million rand in 1 year. But now, the collectors are finding their services going to waste and are being forced to turn to government handouts. Chomgono, CGTN.
Traders have virtually abandoned Zimbabwe's stock market as the country's lockdown adds to the strains on an economy that was already battered with severe drought, inflation in triple digits, and a deep shortage of foreign exchange. Trading volumes at the bourse have plunged by 55% since the government imposed strict measures to limit movement on the 30th of March. The CEO of the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange said foreign participation has dwindled to just 10% of all activity compared to 2019's figure of 34%. The fall off in trading suggests the exchange is losing its status as a haven for local investors who have turned to stocks as a way of protecting their savings in recent years. The president of Zambia's Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Chubaka Kawesha, is calling for the world to unite to help fight and end COVID-19. Kawesha urges countries to learn from China's experience in tackling the infectious disease.
The Chinese authorities have been able to contain the pandemic, and it's important that the learnings that China has picked out of containing the pandemic are shared with the rest of the world. It's a global pandemic, therefore it requires a global response. So all the achievements that China has made since you picked on this pandemic, our appeal is that technology transfer is extended to, and knowledge is extended to Africa, Zambia, and the rest of the world. What is important is that China joins and strengthens the response rate of the rest of the world. China is manufacturing vital equipment, materials that the rest of the world needs, and is doing it in large scale and quantities. It's important that China comes to the table to help other countries in responding effectively into controlling and containing the pandemic.
And we're not done just yet. We've got a lot more news coming your way. We'll see you on the other side of the break. Here's a look at what's ahead. Music legend Miriam Makeba's Pata Pata song remade to spread COVID-19 messages and give hope.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Thanate, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Treasure Riziki lived in South Africa as a refugee as he built his career. He worked as a car guard by day and a security guard at night in Durban. Today, he is an award-winning musician. who owns his own record label and has collaborated with a variety of top African musicians. Let's take a look.
Treza Riziki grew up in Goma, in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. He lost both parents at the age of 17. In 2007, he took a leap of faith and made his way to South Africa.
I arrived in Durban as a young man, about 20 years old, refugee, and I had no other ways to make a living. So I worked as a car guard, I worked as a security guard, I worked on the streets. It was very tough at that time, very tough.
He released his debut album in September 2015. It won Best Pop Album at the South African Music Awards. His second album, Beautiful Madness, also got him an award.
I'm very, very grateful that I got to go through everything that I went through, because it shaped me into the man that I am today, gave me perseverance, and most importantly, gave me humility and how to treat people. Does not matter what they do in life, does not matter how they look like, or where you find them, and just to treat people with respect and dignity.
Nostalgia is a 13-track old with influences from some of his musical heroes such as Papa Wemba. It features a wide-ranging mix of African artists. Sondela is a mellow collaboration with South African singer and songwriter Asanda Mvana, known to many as Msaki.
Nostalgia has been one of my favorite projects I've done so far, because it represents the sounds I grew up listening to in Congo. I took that sound, I took my childhood, the sonic element of my childhood, and brought it to life.
It's one of my favorite collaborations to date, just because it's really easy to write with Trezor. He brings out a really fun, creative side of me, and I think what makes it special is that we don't really take ourselves too seriously, and the songs come quite quickly.
When he's not on the road performing, Treza can be found managing his record label. He also travels often with the United Nations Refugee Agency.
I'm an ambassador for the UN Refugee Agency. The aim for why I work with the UN agency the refugee agency is to change the narrative of refugees in Africa. I'm a refugee myself. I came to South Africa as a refugee, and now people need to look at be like, hey, look how a refugee looks like.
The music star says he has not forgotten where he came from and does not take any of it for granted. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Well, what a remarkable story there. Well, as artists around the world lend their voices to the COVID-19 fight, South Africa's smash hit Pata Pata has been remade. The song by legendary musician Miriam Makeba hit the international charts over 50 years ago. It's been revived by Beninese star Angelique Kidjo, and the United Nations Children Organization, UNICEF, is using it to spread a message about hygiene and social distancing across Africa. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
What's called the world's most defiantly joyful song has been re-recorded to spread information and hope in a time of COVID-19. Pata Pata by South African anti-apartheid music legend Miriam Makeba has been rewritten to encourage safe distancing and hand washing. Pata Pata is one of the most distinct melodies out of Africa. It's been redone by Beninese singer Angelique Kidjo from her home studio to reach the remotest areas in Africa, where television and social media are still luxuries.
We know that radio still across Africa is the way to reach people, and we know that there is just a couple of simple messages that everyone keeps hearing, but they don't reach everyone because not everyone has that connectivity. Angelique Kidjo, who was very close to Miriam Makeba, loved the idea of making it.
Zolani Mahola, former lead singer of South African band Freshly Ground, says the song holds deep meaning and is once again being used to address a crisis.
Whether a song is in French or it's in Xhosa, and if you don't understand the words, you can connect with the feeling, you know? So I think it's an incredibly powerful medium to use with children in terms of getting a positive message across. There's something so playful about it.
For Kidjo, the song has struck a personal chord. She lost a dear friend and fellow West African musician, Mano Dibango, to COVID-19 in March.
It really brings home, you know, that that sense of the loss, certainly knowing about her personal losses, the weight of her loss, but just how serious this is. But in that joyful way that, you know, that Africans have.
The song has been well received, especially by children, many dancing along to the joyful melody. But there are still many issues that Africa faces as COVID-19 tightens its grip, including starvation, health challenges, and deepening poverty. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Stay tuned. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's a look at the headline. Organizers of the postponed London Marathon still hopeful of a Kipchoge-Bekele showdown.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Welcome back. Two of the greatest long-distance runners ever